In half an hour, EastEnders, but first, tonight's edition of Inside Out London.
Hello there, I'm Matthew Wright. You're watching Inside Out London. Here's what's coming up on tonight's show. Caught red-handed.
Anything to say about £45,000 taken?
The benefit cheats raking in thousands from housing scams.
It meant the council had paid out in excess of £45,000 for the period she said she was living there.
And she'd never lived there?
And she had never lived there.
Failing to recruit ethnic minorities. Former Home Secretary Jackie Smith finds out why the Met is struggling to reflect the London of today.
There's over 200 languages spoken in London at the moment, and it's a success story of the global world we're in. So we want to make sure that the Met not just keeps pace with that change, but we've got to do a lot to sort of catch up.
And it's hideous and stomach-churning. We go inside the capital's most gruesome museum.
This is actual bits of human body that's stuck to a table?
It is, yes.
To the non-medical eye, these can seem pretty weird, pretty wonderful, and just a little bit stomach-churning.
Tonight, in an exclusive report, we expose the criminals making fortunes from false benefit claims. Housing benefit fraud costs London's local authorities millions of pounds every year. In Westminster, it's estimated that as many as 1 in 10 claims is illegal. Well, over the summer, we were given unprecedented access to Westminster City Council's fraud squad as they tracked down the fake claimants. And Mark Jordan, he's got the story.
In the city of Westminster lie some of the most expensive homes in the world. It's hard to imagine you can rent in a luxury private block like this and get housing benefit to pay for most of it. Concierge included. The fraud inspectors have seen it all.
The day I went to the property where it had a swimming pool, that did amaze me.
Westminster City Council.
But the real heist comes when you then illegally sublet your taxpayer-funded Des-Res to someone else. The controversial housing benefit cap merely nibbles at the profits.
The cap won't have a knock-on effect to them because they'll still be able to rent out that property for £900, £1,000 a week.
I've spent the summer months with Westminster's housing fraud squad.
Anything to say about £45,000 taken?
Here in Westminster, it would be fair to say we've been mugs and we've been mugged.
Don't break the camera.
No, I'm not breaking the camera.
Unlike many great cities in the world, here in London you can be on benefits or live in a council house and have very, very wealthy neighbours. For critics of welfare, this is absurd, but for others, it's all part of London's rich tapestry. But for the dishonest, it's a licence to make thousands off the back of the taxpayer. Police and Westminster fraud officers gather for a raid just off the wealthy Edgware Road.
So we'll get going, knock on a few doors and see who we can find.
Even with the controversial housing benefit cap now in place, millions are still being paid out for people to live in plush private apartments like this.
We're now going to go round various properties here to see if they are being sublet and see if the people who are meant to be there are there.
Westminster's appointed an anti-fraud czar from its Conservative ranks.
Our investigators have talked for years about a dark figure of fraud of about 10%. That's potentially looking at £25 million of potential fraud in one local authority. People are coming to London. They've been told you can have a free life. If you can get into the system, you acquire a property, you pretend to separate, that creates a spare property which you can then sublet.
The council says dishonest asylum seekers from the Middle East have cornered one particularly lucrative area of fraud, subletting to the wealthy Edgware Road Arab community. The local garage gives an idea of the type of money in this area. Many rich Arab families prefer flats to hotels for long leisure and medical visits to London, and they're willing to pay.
There's big money changing hands for these tenancies, anything up to £5,000 a week.
Could you just open the door, please? I can obviously see you now.
Of the raids that we carried out on 7 targeted blocks, we found between 61 and 95% to be fraudulent sublet. Those claims were worth £1 million.
Back at the mansion block, someone's in, but it's not the person Westminster Council is paying benefit to.
She went and shut all the curtains when the police officer came round. Yeah. I have seen signs in people's properties before. If you go in some flats, there's a notice on the back of the door. It tends to all be in Arabic, and it'll just explain not to answer the door to the police or to say you're a family member.
The next call is to the home of an Iraqi granted asylum and over £1,000 a month in housing benefit. But it's a totally different family that answer.
Do you rent this flat? Have you had to pay money to stay here? How much do you rent the flat for? So that's £900 per week you pay to live here?
Yes.
Okay, and you're renting this flat while you're having the medical treatment?
This Kuwaiti family are innocently over for private medical treatment for their mother.
He was living in that flat paying £900 a week to be staying there with his entire family, and he was renting it through an unknown gentleman who would come round each week, collect the rent from him.
Okay, he's asking what's the matter.
There's someone who's living here who's receiving what's called housing benefit to pay the rent, and he's also then receiving the extra £900 a week from yourself. This gentleman is receiving cash in hand. So it's like having a well-paid full-time job.
What do you want me to do?
When you come into Westminster, it's always best to look for a hotel. The first thing that will happen tomorrow morning when I return to the offices, the inquiries will be made to find out where the person in question is really living. The claim in question will be suspended to stop the taxpayer losing any further money, and then we will seek to have him arrested by the police.
The raid has left new arrivals fresh from the airport abandoned on a curbside. Several frauds have been uncovered.
That one visit has saved us £115,000. But again, you're not actually looking at the historical overpayments or the profits from the subletting, which we will never, by the way, stand any chance of clawing back.
None of this is going to please taxpayers and nor the legitimate neighbours in these plush blocks.
I've been spat at and called names.
So you haven't been physically threatened? You have. OK. All right, well, we won't go there.
Many residents are too frightened to be identified.
People in other parts of the world, they laugh at us. They don't realise we're very tolerant. They mix up tolerance with stupidity and a soft touch. Why don't you do something about it? They don't shackle them. What have you done about it? Because this has been going on for years.
These guys locally, they are not frightened of town hall officials with clipboards, because they know we have absolutely no powers of investigation, powers of arrest.
Fighting such fraud can be lonely.
I'm absolutely staggered. I have been disappointed by the cowardice of politicians to properly address it. I think it is something you can address politically without being called a racist or a bigot.
OK, and we pay your benefit every fortnight to you. £511 into your bank account.
Hundreds of sublets have been uncovered. This claimant insists he's lived here over a year, but there's not a single personal item, not even a toothbrush. Only a few are prosecuted. It usually takes over a year and costs Westminster thousands. Althari Alanzi was taken to court.
She came to Britain as an asylum seeker, which then gave her quite legitimately the rights to claim state benefits from the UK government.
She picked an address in a luxury waterside complex next door to the Hilton on Edgware Road. Housing benefit paid the rent.
We'd gone round to the property she was meant to be living in, and there was a different person in the flat. They advised they'd been living there for about 2 years, and as a result it meant the council had paid out in excess of £45,000 for the period she said she was living there.
And she'd never lived there.
And she had never lived there.
Do you have anything to say about your fraud? Do you have anything to say about taking money?
It took 14 months to process the case and find Mrs. Athari Alanzi guilty of housing benefit fraud.
Anything to say about £45,000 taken? Don't break the camera.
In the end, the magistrates decided to sentence her to 11 weeks in prison. Unfortunately, in Miss Alanzi's case, she doesn't have any assets that the council can recover from.
I think it's outrageous. Some of the decisions that are made are totally demoralising. There's very little downside to this crime. Even if you go to prison for 12 weeks and you've kept several £100,000 worth of money, it's good return for 12 weeks, isn't it?
Mark Jordan there. Now then, still to come on tonight's show.
Hunter's collection lets you peer under the skin of human and animal bodies in amazingly intimate detail. He's got everything from newly hatched crocodiles and a camel's stomach to giant human facial tumours and the amputated leg of an 18th century coachman.
It's been a rocky few months for the Met Police, who faced allegations of corruption, the use of smear tactics and a failure to tackle racism. And there's now real pressure on them to win more trust from the communities they're supposed to be serving. For starters, many reckon the Met needs to recruit more ethnic minority officers to reflect the makeup of our capital. But its track record in this area leaves a lot to be desired, and to make real progress may require some bold political steps, as former Home Secretary Jackie Smith explains.
The capital is now a more diverse city than ever before, with 40% of Londoners coming from an ethnic minority. But the Metropolitan Police Force that serves the capital remains overwhelmingly and disproportionately white. Back in 1999, the Macpherson report into the murder of Stephen Lawrence concluded that the Met was institutionally racist and recommended that 25% of their officers should come from ethnic minorities. But 14 years on, that figure still only stands at 1 in 10. Successive Met commissioners and Home Secretaries, including myself, have recognised and targeted the issue but failed to make enough progress. It boils down to an issue of trust and confidence. People are more likely to report crime, to act as witnesses, to support the police if they think that the police officers actually reflect their communities. Here in Hounslow, PC Kami Reiki is holding a session at a Hindu temple, offering safety advice and explaining how the police can offer assistance.
We want to touch on making you aware of possible bogus callers. Sometimes when I'm with the Asian women's groups and I speak Punjabi fluently, albeit I was speaking a bit of Hindi today, they automatically seem to click with you because they feel you understand their cultural backgrounds and where they're coming from if they're trying to explain a problem. On your purse, young lady, so that it rattles when, you know, when somebody tries to take your purse, it rattles. And this might be the first instance that they're meeting a police officer. One, it gives them the confidence to speak to a police officer, and two, they go away knowing the simple things.
What do you think you can bring to policing that helps you to do the job?
It's inspiration for people, because if they see an Asian police officer, you're more likely to inspire maybe some of the younger girls as well. They're thinking, oh, she can do it, well, I'd like to do that.
And what do your family think about your role in the police?
My family say, when are you going to be at home, Mum? There you go.
The Met needs plenty more people like PC Reiki. But to be fair, the numbers of ethnic minority officers have been growing. From just 890 at the time of the Macpherson report 14 years ago to around 3,200 today. When Norwell Roberts joined the Met back in 1967, it was a very different picture. He was the only black police officer in the whole of Britain.
The first I knew I'd been accepted was when one of my mates showed me his newspaper and it said London to have first coloured policeman soon, because coloured was the word that was used then. My beat was Covent Garden. There was a story going round, you know, that one of the porters apparently told one of the policemen who was taking me out on the beat, here's a couple of apples for yourself and a banana for your monkey. I was prepared to accept that sort of thing then, although perhaps not the racism that I encountered inside the police station. I had buttons ripped off my uniform. My uniform was thrown behind a locker where it was all dusty. I had my tyre slashed. I had my car towed away. I was obviously called nigger on a regular basis, and that was only from the other policemen. But remember, this was 1967. So whoever was the first would have had a few problems. I'm glad that I was able to endure those problems and came out on the other side.
It must have been pretty tough to endure, though. Didn't you ever feel like, that's it, I've had enough, I'm leaving?
No, I never did. I just used to go back to the section house and cry.
Today's Met is a different place from the one Norwell joined, but still dogged by accusations of racism. From a failure to take complaints seriously to a disproportionate targeting of ethnic minorities in stop and search, and ongoing complaints about the handling of the Stephen Lawrence case. So what's the Met doing to build up trust?
We start the night off with drill and inspection, and then we roll on to lessons such as stop and search, theft act.
This volunteer police cadet scheme run by the Met tries to give teenagers an appreciation of police work, and plenty of the cadets are from ethnic minorities.
Just under 50% of our cadets come from black and minority ethnic backgrounds, which is wonderful. And I think probably it's partly because it's an opportunity to have a much softer relationship with the police. And obviously they get a lot of experience of what frontline policing is about.
I've wanted to be a police officer for as long as I can remember, from when I was really little. We have guest speakers come in, like the armed police. We do a lot of first aids.
There seems to be plenty of enthusiasm for police work among these young cadets, and ethnic minorities are also well represented in the ranks of police community support officers, a role I developed as Home Secretary. But when it comes to police officers, many ethnic minority applicants just aren't getting through the recruitment process.
There are issues around like vetting and an area of the recruitment which we call search. BME candidates tend not to do so well around the comprehension, and this is due to the fact that sometimes English is not their first language. So whereas this individual may have a degree, the process itself does not reflect that. It's all well and good talking about getting bums on seats effectively, but it's about the retention of those officers once they're there. You can count on one hand the amount of inspectors and chief inspectors, superintendents that we have, which is not acceptable.
The Met's new recruitment drive is going to try and get to grips with some of these issues by giving greater weight to applicants' knowledge of the capital.
In the next 2 to 3 years, we will want to select 5,000 new constables for the Met. That sheer number means it's the first time we will go out to the wider population of London since 2008 in a recruitment campaign. We will be coaching people from black and minority ethnic backgrounds to prepare for some of the selection processes. But some of our other thinking is really about how do we tailor a recruitment process to ensure that we target London as our pool.
The Met seems serious about trying to make itself more representative. But what if this new recruitment drive doesn't succeed? Will more drastic action be needed?
I wouldn't rule anything out because we have not, as a service, succeeded in balancing our workforce with the communities we police.
A radical political solution certainly made a difference to the makeup of the Police Service of Northern Ireland. When it launched in 2001, it ran a 10-year recruitment programme known as 50-50. For every Protestant officer recruited, a Catholic officer had to be recruited too.
50-50 in Northern Ireland came in because only 8% of the police service of Northern Ireland was from a Catholic community, 92% from Protestant. It was without question successful. We achieved, just by the time I left, 30% of the police service was drawn from the Catholic community. That was a significant achievement, and we defended every legal challenge for the 7 years I was there.
Positive discrimination is always going to be controversial, but sometimes policy has to drive change. In 1997, I was elected to Parliament on the basis of being selected on an all-women shortlist. So far, that's the only thing that's actually managed to make Parliament more representative of men and women, for example. Positive discrimination is currently illegal in the mainland UK. So to bring in a system like 50-50 to boost ethnic minority officers would require a change in the law. So is that the point the Met has now reached?
If the current plans don't succeed and our optimism doesn't bear fruit, ideas like that have to be part of the conversation. But as you know, moving it from a proposal to something that survives the rigours of Parliament is quite another issue.
The recruitment campaign recently launched by the Met is a prime opportunity to make sure that the policing really does represent communities across London. But if that doesn't work, if the Met isn't able to recruit and to retain and promote more ethnic minority police officers, then I think Met chiefs and government really do need to consider giving positive discrimination a go.